Power it never announces when it's about to shift. It doesn't send invitations or warnings. It just happens, quietly, like a shadow slipping across the floor, until suddenly everyone realizes the room doesn't belong to the same person anymore. That's how it works. Slow, subtle, almost invisible, and then all at once. The kind of shift that leaves people blinking, stuttering, wondering when exactly they lost control of the situation they swore they were running. They never see it coming, and that's what makes it so delicious. You don't grab power with grand gestures. No, you build it in the small moments, the ones no one pays attention to. The nights you kept going when everyone else quit. The times you swallowed your frustration and learned something instead of exploding. The tiny choices you made, ugly, painful, uncomfortable, that slowly turned you into someone stronger than the version you were yesterday. No applause, no spotlight, just quiet evolution. And while they were busy laughing, doubting, dismissing, you were sharpening yourself in silence. That's how the tables eventually turn. Because the funny part is, people don't notice change until it threatens them. You could grow every single day for a year, and they'll still treat you like the same old you, until one day they try to pull the same trick, the same insult, the same manipulation, and it doesn't work. You don't react the way you used to. You don't crumble, you don't flinch, you don't shrink. You just stare back with a calmness they can't comprehend. And that's when the shift becomes real.
Not for you?
You've known it for a while, but for them. That moment they realize the ground beneath them isn't theirs anymore. It's the silence before the storm that scares them the most. They don't fear your anger. They fear your lack of it. They don't fear your chaos. They fear your control. They don't fear your voice. They fear the way you've learned to use it. When someone who was once predictable becomes unreadable, untouchable, unstoppable, that's when panic settles in their bones. They start replaying old conversations, analyzing your tone, searching for clues they missed. They sense the power shift long before they admit it. They feel it in your posture, your confidence, your refusal to play the role they designed for you. You see, power doesn't change hands with explosions. It changes hands with realizations. One day they wake up and understand the dynamic is different. Their opinions no longer chain you. Their validation no longer fuels you. Their criticism no longer crushes you. You've detached from the strings they pulled, and now their hands are empty. That's the moment the panic hits. Because controlling someone who doesn't need your approval is impossible. Manipulating someone who knows their worth is pointless. Undermining someone who no longer cares what you think, that's a losing battle. They start to feel it, the shift. Not because you announced your strength, but because your silence exposes their insecurity. You don't need to scream to command attention. You don't need to threaten to change the energy in a room. You don't need to fight to win. That's the part they never understood. Power isn't loud. It's the calm that unsettles the room. It's the confidence that doesn't need defending. It's the resilience that doesn't break under pressure. And when the shift becomes undeniable, when they finally see that the person who used to stand beneath them is suddenly standing above every expectation they ever placed, that's when the crisis erupts. Because the story they wrote about you no longer fits. The ending they planned no longer applies. The role they cast you in no longer exists. You've rewritten the script without asking for permission. Power shifts quietly, then suddenly. You know what really unsettles people? Not your strength, not your success, not your resilience. No. It's the fact that you didn't ask for permission before becoming who you are now. They expected you to notify them, to ease them into the new version of you, to give them a gentle little heads up before you changed the entire dynamic. But you didn't. You just grew. You just transformed. You just walked right out of the mold they tried so hard to keep you in. And that lack of warning, that's what drives them insane. People love control. Not real control. Mind you, just the illusion that they can predict you. They want to believe that you'll always respond the same way, always keep the same insecurities, always fall into the same traps. It gives them comfort, familiarity, a sense of superiority. But when you start moving different, thinking different, reacting different, it throws their whole little world into chaos. Because now they can't map you out. They can't manipulate you. They can't keep you small. And their biggest frustration is realizing you didn't even think about them while evolving. They want to believe your growth was supposed to be a group decision, something they get to approve, negotiate, or debate. But self-improvement doesn't come with a consultation form. You don't owe anyone a preview of your transformation. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your rise. You don't owe anyone a slow motion version of your evolution just so they can keep up. You changed because you needed to. You grew because staying the same was killing you. You shifted because something inside you demanded more. And that inner voice doesn't ask the outside world for permission. That's the thing about real growth. It's selfish. Beautiful, honest, necessary, but selfish. And that's perfectly fine. Because the people who wanted to keep you small weren't thinking about what was best for you. They were thinking about what was easiest for them. Your doubts kept them comfortable. Your silence made them feel powerful. Your hesitation gave them control. But the moment you broke that cycle, the moment you stopped being predictable, the moment you refused to shrink to fit their expectations, you became a threat to everything they believed about you. You didn't warn them because warnings soften the blow. Warnings give people time to build defenses, prepare excuses, or guilt trip you into staying the same. And deep down you knew. If you gave them that chance, they'd use it. They'd manipulate your empathy. They'd weaponize your guilt. They'd talk you out of becoming the person you were meant to be. But you didn't give them that opportunity. You moved in silence, and silence is the one thing they can't control. Your lack of warning wasn't disrespect. It was necessary. Because some people don't deserve a seat at the table where you discuss your next chapter. Some people don't deserve access to your fears, your plans, your hopes, your inner battles. They already proved they can't handle your vulnerability without using it against you. So why would you give them a front row seat to your transformation? You owe them nothing, not explanations, not justifications, not apologies. And that's where the panic kicks in. The moment they realize they have no influence over you anymore, no leverage, no emotional control, no ability to predict your next move. That's when the crisis begins. Because people can only dominate you when you let them into your head, and you've closed that door, locked it, boarded it up, moved to an entirely different room. Your independence feels like rebellion to them. Your peace feels like arrogance. Your growth feels like betrayal. You owe no one a warning. You don't have to soften your transformation to make others comfortable. You don't have to dim your light to spare their insecurity. You don't have to shrink just because they preferred you small. You don't have to ask permission to rise. You ever watch people crumble under the weight of their own expectations? It's fascinating. They spend so much time acting like they've got everything figured out, like they're the solid ones, the strong ones, the ones who'll never slip. Yet the moment life even taps them on the shoulder, they shatter like glass dropped on concrete. And while they're busy falling apart, there you are rising. Slowly, steadily, almost annoyingly calm. They don't understand it, and that's what makes it so deliciously ironic. Because when once they break, the world pauses for them. Everyone gathers around offering sympathy excuses, delicate little explanations to protect their ego. But when it's you break, they call it weakness, failure, a sign that you're not cut out for the big stages of life. Funny how the rules twist depending on who's playing the game. But here's the part that really gets them. While they're spiraling downward, waiting for someone to hold their hand, you're busy crawling out of your own wreckage with nothing but stubbornness and a pulse. You rise because you have to. You rise because no one else is going to do it for you. You rise because breaking may be allowed, but staying broken has never been your style. People fear what they can't predict. And you've become unpredictable. They expected you to stay down. They expected you to keep doubting yourself, questioning your worth, dragging your feet through the same trenches they thought you'd never escape. But you shifted. You chose to get up when everything said you shouldn't. You chose to breathe through the weight pressing against your chest. You chose to stand while they were too busy mourning their own cracks. That's what unsettles them. Not your strength. No. Your refusal to stay defined by your weakest moments. They think breaking is the end of the story. They don't realize some people treat it as the beginning. While they curl inward, drowning in complaints and excuses, you take your broken pieces and arrange them in a new shape. Something stronger, something sharper, something that doesn't fit back into the little box they had ready for you. And that scares them more than anything. They don't know what to do with someone who rebuilds themselves without permission. Every time they crack, they look outward for rescue. Every time you crack, you look inward for resolve. And that difference is why you rise higher than they ever expect. It's not about being fearless. No one is fearless. It's about embracing the chaos within you, shaking hands with the uncertainty, and using it as fuel. They treat their chaos like a curse. You treat yours like a spark. When they break, they cling to the hope that someone will fix them. When you break, you sharpen your edges. You learn something from every wound, every fall, every moment of doubt that tried to swallow you whole. That's why your rise is quieter, steadier, more powerful. It's not dramatic, it's intentional. And intentional change always unsettles those who thrive on appearances instead of depth. They crumble because their identity depends on stability. You rise because your identity was forged in instability. You've been tested in ways they can't even imagine. You've walked through storms they wouldn't survive 5 minutes in. You've learned to stay calm in the middle of chaos, to breathe when the air feels thin, to laugh at the absurdity of it all. That's why your rise is inevitable. Not because you're lucky, not because you're special, but because you've grown comfortable in the one place they fear the most, your own mess. They break. You rise. And that contrast alone is enough to shake their world. You ever notice how people only start panicking when they see you becoming someone they didn't account for? Their crisis. Oh, it's not about the world falling apart. No, it's about you slipping out of the role they assigned you. Their meltdown, their confusion, their sudden loss of balance. That's the loudest confirmation that you've outgrown every version of yourself they were comfortable with. They don't fall apart because you failed. They fall apart because you evolved. And evolution terrifies people who still cling to their old illusions of control. They had you measured, labeled, packaged neatly in their minds. They thought they knew your limits, your fears, your reactions. They thought they could predict you, like some tired punchline they've heard 1,000 times. But growth ruins predictions. Suddenly you're not responding the way you used to. You're not bending where you once broke. You're not shrinking just because someone raises their voice or throws their doubts at you. And that shift, it rattles them. They don't know who they're dealing with anymore. And that uncertainty feels like an earthquake under their feet. See? People love the version of you that makes them feel superior, calm, safe, like they've got everything under control. But when you start stepping into your own power, when you start showing that you can withstand storms they never even saw coming, that's when the anxiety kicks in. That's when the whispers start. That's when the crisis begins. They start questioning everything. How you got so strong? When you learn to see through them, why their tactics don't work anymore. They start spiraling because your growth exposes their stagnation. Their crisis is proof. Proof that you're rising faster than they can process. Proof that you're no longer operating at the level they're comfortable with. Proof that their old way of dealing with you, dismissal, doubt, underestimation, has lost its power. You've stepped outside the frame they built around you, and now they're staring at a picture that doesn't match their expectations. And the human mind hates that. It hates being wrong. It hates being blindsided. It hates being forced to confront the fact that the person they once looked down on is now towering over the parts of themselves they've ignored for years. It's almost entertaining, isn't it? Watching them scramble to adjust, trying to figure out what changed, trying to reassemble the version of you that made them feel like they were in control. But you can't shrink back into old skin just to make others comfortable. Once you rise, the old versions of you become uninhabitable. And every step you take forward pushes them deeper into their panic, because now they have to face the uncomfortable truth. You were never weak, you were just underestimated. Their crisis is the mirror reflection of your growth. The higher you climb, the more they feel the ground shift beneath them. They're not used to it. They're not built for it. They've spent so long depending on your doubts to keep you small, and now those doubts aren't loud enough to hold you back. You're thinking differently, seeing differently, moving differently, and they don't have the emotional vocabulary to handle it. You're not playing by their rules anymore. You're not trapped in their expectations. And the moment they realize they can't weigh you down with their opinions, their judgment, their old narratives, that's the moment everything inside them starts cracking. Because your growth doesn't just challenge their perception of you. It challenges their perception of themselves, and nothing sends someone into crisis faster than realizing they've been wrong about you the entire time. Their crisis is your confirmation. Their confusion is your progress. Their panic is your proof that you've stepped into a version of yourself they never saw coming. Confidence. That's the part they never saw coming. See, people can handle your silence, your struggle, your uncertainty. They're comfortable when you're doubting yourself, when you tilt your head and second, guess every move, when you tiptoe around life like you're apologizing for existing. But the moment you start walking with certainty, with steadiness, with that quiet fire in your eyes, that's when everything inside them starts to crack. Because confidence isn't just a trait, it's rebellion. And nothing threatens fragile egos more than someone who finally realizes their own worth. Confidence is dangerous because it rewrites the entire script. They were used to you shrinking yourself, minimizing your presence, swallowing your words. They got used to you dimming your light so theirs could shine a little brighter. But confidence flips the switch. Suddenly you're not asking if you belong. You're acting like you do. Suddenly you're not waiting for validation. You're giving it to yourself. Suddenly you're not bending to keep the peace. You're standing tall, even if it unsettles the room. And that shift shakes people who depended on your insecurity. Because confidence isn't just about feeling good. No. Confidence is clarity. It's the moment you realize you don't need anyone's permission to take up space. The moment you stop apologizing for your existence. The moment you understand that your voice has weight, your presence has power, and your dreams aren't up for negotiation. That realization alone is enough to turn you into a different kind of creature. One they can't manipulate, can't intimidate, can't diminish. Confidence makes you unpredictable in the best way. It makes you immune to their old tricks. And the funniest part? You didn't even become louder. You didn't start screaming your worth from rooftops. Confident people don't need volume. They carry a certain stillness that speaks louder than any shouting ever could. You walk into a room and suddenly people adjust themselves, sit straighter, watch you from the corner of their eye. They can feel it, the shift. The atmosphere bends around someone who knows who they are. It's not arrogance. It's not showmanship. It's alignment. And people who rely on chaos hate when someone becomes aligned. Confidence is rebellion because it dismantles every lie you were fed. The lie that you're not enough. The lie that you're inconvenient. The lie that you should be grateful for crumbs. The lie that you should stay silent to avoid conflict. Once you stop believing those lies, you become uncontrollable. And nothing terrifies controlling minds more than someone who can't be controlled. They call it arrogance because they don't want to admit its evolution. They call it attitude because they don't want to acknowledge your growth. They call you different. Like it's an insult, when really it's the highest compliment. They're telling you that you're no longer a reflection they can manipulate. You don't bend at their tone. You don't flinch at their disapproval. You don't shrink under their gaze. You've outgrown the version of yourself they depended on. Confidence doesn't mean you think you're perfect. It means you're done playing small. It means you know your flaws but refuse to let them cage you. It means you can walk into uncertainty without trembling. It means you trust yourself even when the world doesn't. And that trust, that trust is what burns them alive. Because while they're still searching for themselves in the opinions of others, you've already built a home inside your own mind. Confidence is rebellion because it signals that you no longer need them. Not their approval, not their guidance, not their validation. You've become self-sustaining, self-directed, self-defined. And once you reach that place, their influence evaporates, their power dissolves, their opinions lose their bite. You stop dancing for applause and start moving to your own rhythm, and that rhythm is untouchable. Confidence is your rebellion because it's the moment you take your power back and refuse to ever hand it over again. Turning the tables, now that's where things get interesting. Not because it's loud or dramatic, not because it comes with fireworks or some grand announcement, but because it happens in a way no one expects. One moment you're the one being doubted, underestimated, placed neatly in their little box of assumptions, and the next, you're the one holding all the cards. And you didn't need to shout, beg, or convince anyone, you just shifted. Quietly, sharp, mercilessly, and that silence, that precision, that's what makes it sting. See, people get comfortable believing you'll always be the one trying to prove yourself. They build their confidence on top of your hesitation. They rise by leaning on your self-doubt. They laugh a bit too loudly at your mistakes because it reassures them that they're still ahead. But tables aren't nailed down. Power isn't permanent. Dynamics aren't fixed. All it takes is one moment of clarity, one decision, one shift in mindset for everything to flip. And when it does, when suddenly you're the one they can't predict or control, the shock on their faces becomes poetry. Turning the tables isn't revenge, it's revelation. It's the moment they finally see you without the fog of their assumptions. It's when your actions contradict the story they wrote about you. They thought you'd stay fragile. They thought you'd break under pressure. They thought you'd keep begging for crumbs. But you didn't. You grew teeth. You grew spine. You grew into someone who no longer needs their approval to breathe. And that transformation exposes every flaw in their narrative. Because when you turn the tables, you don't do it out of spite. You do it because the old dynamic became too small, too suffocating, too insulting to the person you were becoming. You outgrew the role they cast you in, and suddenly they're confronted with someone they can't manipulate with the same old tricks. Your calmness frustrates them. Your detachment confuses them. Your confidence rattles them. You don't rise with rage, you rise with clarity. And clarity is the sharpest blade of all. What they thought was your weakness turns out to be your weapon. What they mocked becomes your momentum. What they underestimated becomes your advantage. And that realization hits them hard because it means they never had the upper hand. They just had a louder voice. They mistook your patience for passivity, your silence for surrender, your kindness for weakness. But you were never weak. You were calculating. You were learning. You were observing the entire time, waiting for the right moment to move. And when you finally act, you don't need permission. You don't need applause. You don't need validation. You just shift the balance with a decision they can't undo. That's the beauty of turning the tables. It doesn't require force, just awareness. You stop playing their game, and suddenly their entire strategy collapses. They're left scrambling, trying to understand how the person they thought they had figured out became the one rewriting the script. Your growth threatens them because it exposes the limits of their vision. They spent so long seeing you as less that they never prepared for the possibility of you becoming more. And that's why turning the tables feels like revenge to them, even though you're not even trying to hurt anyone. You're simply stepping into a version of yourself that doesn't need their permission to exist. But to someone who built their ego on your insecurities, your rise feels like an attack. The loudest revenge is the shift in power they never saw coming. Not the punch you throw, but the one you no longer need to. Not the words you shout, but the ones you don't bother speaking. Not the battle you fight, but the one you walk away from because you've already outgrown it. Turning the tables is your loudest revenge because it proves you were always capable. You just didn't feel the need to show it until now.